At 1:47 in the morning, in an affluent desert neighborhood just north of Tucson, Arizona, a figure approached the front door of a single-story home. The figure was dressed in all black, ski mask, gloves, a zipped jacket, a 25-liter backpack slung over one shoulder, and a holstered handgun visible on the waist. The person reached for the doorbell camera and disconnected it. 25 minutes later, at 2:12 a.m., the camera's software logged one final alert. Person detected on camera, but there was no video. The homeowner didn't have an active cloud subscription. Whatever happened next was supposed to disappear into the darkness. At 2:28 a.m., a pacemaker app on a cell phone sitting on a nightstand inside the home lost its Bluetooth connection. The phone stayed, the pacemaker moved, which means the person wearing it was physically removed from the house. When the sun came up, an 84-year-old woman named Nancy Guthrie did not log into her Sunday morning church service. She did not answer her phone. She did not take her medication. She was gone. Her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, rushed to the home with family members. At 12:03 p.m., they called 911. Deputies arrived 12 minutes later. They found blood on the front porch. DNA testing would confirm it belonged to Nancy. As of today, 14 days later, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. No suspect has been identified. No arrest has been made. No proof of life has been provided. Over 13,000 tips have flooded the FBI. SWAT teams have raided homes. A second person has been detained and released. Ransom notes demanding millions in Bitcoin have been sent to television stations. One man in California was arrested for sending fake ransom texts. And the real kidnapper, the masked figure on that doorbell camera, remains a ghost. An 84-year-old grandmother taken from her bed in the middle of the night from an upscale American suburb for ransom. This is the kind of crime Americans associate with Sinaloa, with Caracas, with Lagos, not with the United States. But it happened. And the way it happened, the way the investigation has unfolded, and the way the institutions responsible for solving it have fractured under pressure tells a story far bigger than one missing woman. This is the story of the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping, and it might be the most disturbing crime in America in decades. Nancy Ellen Guthrie was born Nancy Ellen Long on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She moved to the Tucson, Arizona area in the early 1970s with her family and has lived there for more than 50 years. Her husband, Charles Guthrie, died at age 49 in 1988 during a mining exploration trip in Mexico. She raised 3 children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. At 84 years old, Nancy lives alone in the Catalina foothills, an upscale community north of Tucson known for its high property values, dark skies, and wide-open desert lots where neighbors can't see each other's front doors. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos described her as, quote, sharp as a tack, end quote, with no cognitive impairment. But physically, Nancy is extremely vulnerable. She has limited mobility and cannot walk 50 yards without assistance. She relies on a pacemaker and takes daily medication for a heart condition that, if missed, could be fatal. Her daughter Savannah is one of the most recognized faces in American media. As co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, she earns a reported 8-figure salary and appears in millions of American homes every weekday morning. That connection, experts believe, is almost certainly why Nancy was targeted. In the economics of kidnapping, Nancy Guthrie represents what criminal planners call a soft target with high leverage value, an elderly, physically vulnerable woman whose family has both the emotional motivation and the financial resources to pay. This is a calculation that is made every single day in Mexico City, in Bogota, in Sao Paulo. It is almost never made in the suburbs of Arizona. Almost. On the evening of Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy took an Uber at 5:32 p.m. to her daughter Annie's home for dinner and card games. A normal Saturday night. Her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, drove her home at approximately 9:48 p.m. The garage door at her home opened, then closed at 9:50 p.m. That was the last time anyone saw Nancy Guthrie. What happened next was not random. It was calculated. At 1:47 a.m., the Google Nest doorbell camera at the front door was physically disconnected. 19 minutes earlier, at 1:52 a.m., a separate surveillance camera from a neighboring property captured footage of a person carrying a backpack climbing over a wall near the home. The intruder was already inside the perimeter before touching the camera. At 2:12 a.m., the Nest software logged a motion alert, but because Nancy didn't pay for a cloud subscription, no video was saved, or so investigators initially believed. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker app disconnected from her cell phone, which was left on her nightstand. The pacemaker uses Bluetooth. It has a limited range. The disconnection means Nancy was moved out of the house at approximately that time. The entire operation, from camera disconnection to extraction, took roughly 41 minutes. The intruder left behind evidence, blood on the front porch, confirmed as Nancy's through DNA analysis, signs of forced entry, a damaged floodlight, and critically, traces of DNA that did not belong to Nancy or anyone in close contact with her. That unknown DNA is, as of today, still being analyzed. But the intruder also demonstrated a level of sophistication that former FBI agents have called deeply concerning. The camera was disabled manually, not smashed. The timing suggests pre-operational surveillance. The suspect wore a complete disguise. They carried a weapon, and the backpack, later identified by the FBI as a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack sold exclusively at Walmart, suggests they came prepared to take someone. This was not a burglary, this was an extraction. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has been massive in scale and deeply troubled in execution. By February 2nd, the Pima County Sheriff's Department shifted from a missing person search to a full criminal investigation. The FBI joined, alongside U.S. Customs and Border Protection, search and rescue teams, K-9 units, drones, and helicopters. Over 400 law enforcement personnel have been assigned to the case. The FBI's reward has been doubled to $100,000. Over 13,000 tips have been processed through the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, which is staffing a 24-hour command post. But behind that impressive mobilization, there have been serious failures. The most heavily criticized decision came early. The Pima County Sheriff's Department declared the crime scene clear and released Nancy's home back to the family approximately 1 day after she was reported missing. After the home was released, reporters, photographers, and even an Amazon delivery worker were observed walking freely onto the property, approaching the front door where blood was still visible on the porch. Adam Bercovici, a former supervisor of the LAPD's Special Investigations Unit, called it, and I'm quoting directly here, a debacle and one of the worst cases of incompetence he had seen. The conflict between local and federal authorities has been extraordinary. Reuters reported, citing a U.S. law enforcement official, that Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos was blocking the FBI from accessing key evidence, specifically gloves and DNA samples recovered from the scene. Instead of sending evidence to the FBI's National Crime Lab in Quantico, Virginia, where it could be cross-referenced against federal databases like CODIS, Nanos sent it to a private lab in Florida called DNA Labs International. The co-founder of Othram, a leading forensic genealogy company, publicly criticized the decision, noting that DNA Labs International is a traditional lab that consumes evidence to produce a standard profile, rather than preserving it for advanced genealogical analysis. A federal law enforcement source told Fox News the decision risked further slowing a case that grows more urgent by the minute. Nanos denied these allegations, calling them, quote, not even close to the truth, and claiming the FBI agreed with his approach. The sergeant who leads the Pima County Deputies Union, a political opponent of Nanos, publicly said the case had become a circus. Reports surfaced that the Pima County Sheriff's Department's homicide unit handling this case consists of just 6 detectives. Sources told the Daily Mail that these detectives lack major case experience and that the current homicide sergeant has never worked a case of this magnitude. One insider noted that this isn't Los Angeles or New York, that they don't see hundreds of homicides a year, and that it takes a long time for a detective to develop the experience needed for something like this. Perhaps the most revealing moment came on February 10th, when FBI Director Kash Patel released doorbell camera footage that local authorities had initially said didn't exist. This subject matter can be hard to digest, but for most Americans, their personal financial situation is the hardest subject to approach and manage. But with the DollarWise budgeting app, you can finally take control. And since there's a free trial, you can see for yourself. Get a full picture, automate your budget, get powerful insights, and set real goals that change your life. Stop with the overcomplicated budgeting apps like YNAB that no one can figure out. No more being told what to do with Ramsey's Every Dollar. End up being sold a mortgage with Rocket Money, and don't let private equity own you with Monarch. Take the change you need with a budgeting app that was built for people like you, by people like you. Go to dollarwise.app or click the link below to start your free trial. Sheriff Nanos had publicly stated that because the camera was disconnected and Nancy lacked a paid subscription, no video could be recovered. The FBI proved him wrong, recovering what Patel described as residual data from back-end systems, producing the first and only images of the suspect. That recovery, after local law enforcement had given up, highlighted a competency gap that has defined this entire investigation. And it raises a troubling question. In how many other cases in smaller jurisdictions across America does critical evidence get left on the table because local agencies simply don't have the tools or the training? One of the most confounding elements of this case is the total absence of direct communication between the kidnapper and the family. Instead, ransom notes were sent to media outlets, a pattern that multiple former FBI agents have called highly unusual. On February 2nd, KOLD-TV, a Tucson CBS affiliate, received the first ransom note through its anonymous online tip portal. The note demanded millions in Bitcoin, included a specific wallet address, and set 2 deadlines. Critically, it contained details that hadn't been made public: the location of Nancy's Apple Watch inside her home and a damaged floodlight. Whoever sent it had likely been inside the residence. TMZ separately received 3 emails from someone claiming to know the kidnapper's identity, not claiming to be the kidnapper, and demanding Bitcoin in exchange for the information. The 3rd email warned authorities to, quote, "be prepared to go international," a phrase that immediately fueled speculation about a possible crossing into Mexico, given Tucson's proximity to the border. The family responded with emotional video appeals. On February 4th, Savannah Guthrie and her siblings released a statement directly addressing the kidnapper. "We are ready to talk. We need to know without a doubt that she is alive." Days later, in a second video, the family said simply, "We will pay." Within minutes of the first family video, a California man named Derek Colella sent fake ransom texts to Nancy's daughter Annie and her husband asking about a Bitcoin transaction. The FBI traced the texts, and Colella confessed. He was arrested and charged with federal offenses. He had no connection to the actual kidnapping. He was a grief profiteer, exploiting a family's nightmare in real time. Former FBI hostage negotiator Gregory Vecchi said this pattern is unusual. Most ransom cases, he noted, are private. The kidnappers don't want publicity. Retired FBI agent Johnny Grusing pointed to a fundamental disconnect. The abduction looked very tactical and well organized, while the ransom attempts seemed completely disorganized, as if they were not pre-planned. This has led some experts to theorize the crime may have started as a burglary gone wrong, not a planned kidnapping for ransom. A $6 million Bitcoin deadline came and went on February 9th. No payment was made. No proof of life was provided. As of today, the FBI says it is not aware of any ongoing communication between the family and the suspected kidnapper. When Americans watched this story unfold, an 84-year-old grandmother snatched from her bed in the dead of night ransom demands in cryptocurrency, law enforcement agencies fighting each other over evidence, many asked a question that would have seemed absurd a generation ago. Is this what happens in America now, or is this what happens in Mexico? The uncomfortable answer is, it looks a lot more like the latter than anyone wants to admit. Kidnapping for ransom is overwhelmingly a phenomenon of developing countries and conflict zones. In Mexico, the government recorded over 1,600 kidnapping reports in 2023 alone, and most experts believe the real number is dramatically higher because victims' families are often too afraid to report. In some Mexican states, kidnapping is so routine it's colloquially called passing through the office. Colombia averaged 3,000 kidnappings per year from 1996 to 2003, fueled by FARC guerrillas and cartel operations. Nigeria experiences regular mass kidnappings driven by Boko Haram and criminal syndicates. In the United States, stranger abductions for ransom are vanishingly rare. The FBI does not even separately track kidnapping in its Uniform Crime Report. Retired SWAT hostage negotiator Scott Tillema has called ransom kidnapping the least common type of hostage situation in the country. An expert with the Doe Network, who has worked missing persons cases since 2014, said she couldn't remember the last ransom case she'd heard of besides Guthrie, and that she associates them with different periods in American history, like the Lindbergh kidnapping of 1932. But look at the operational profile of this crime. The tactics used in the Guthrie kidnapping align almost perfectly with what's called the Sequestro Express model common across Latin America. Target selection based on family, wealth, and celebrity. Pre-operational surveillance of the home. Counter-surveillance measures to disable cameras. A nighttime extraction using a single, prepared operative. Ransom demands in cryptocurrency designed to be untraceable. And law enforcement dysfunction, with agencies fighting over jurisdiction and evidence while a victim's life hangs in the balance. In Mexico City, in Sao Paulo, in Caracas, this playbook is tragically familiar. In Tucson, Arizona, it is supposed to be impossible, and yet it happened. The Catalina foothills, where Nancy lived, sits 60 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. Pima County is identified by federal law enforcement as a primary corridor for drug trafficking and human smuggling. U.S. Customs and Border Protection deployed tracking dogs and officers within days of the disappearance. The third ransom notes reference to going international fueled speculation about a cross-border dimension. Now, to be fair, no evidence has publicly linked this crime to cartel activity. A former Pima County lieutenant called cartel involvement far-fetched. President Trump, when asked whether cartels were involved, was notably measured, saying, "You can't say that yet. It's a little bit early, but it's somebody who either knew what they were doing very well or they were rank amateurs." But here's what cannot be denied. The criminal ecosystem of the southwestern border region creates an environment where this kind of crime becomes more plausible. When you have organized smuggling networks, established cross-border escape routes, and cryptocurrency payment infrastructure all operating within 60 miles of a victim's home, you don't need a cartel to pull this off. You just need one person who's been watching. And the institutional response, the premature release of the crime scene, the 6th Detective Homicide Unit, the sheriff blocking federal lab access, that is the kind of institutional weakness that in developing countries is the reason kidnapping becomes routine. When the state cannot competently investigate and deter these crimes, criminals notice, and they adjust their calculations accordingly. Let's put this in statistical context because the numbers tell a story that should make every American uncomfortable. FBI crime data from June 2020 to June 2025 recorded approximately 240,000 kidnapping or abduction cases in the United States. Women comprised more than 75% of victims, but women in their 80s accounted for just 646 cases, less than 0.2%. Nancy Guthrie, at 84, with limited mobility and a pacemaker, represents a vanishingly rare victim profile, and more than 533,000 missing person cases were entered into the FBI's National Crime Information Center in 2024. Roughly 100,000 active cases exist at any given time. About 90% are eventually resolved, but after 48 hours, a missing person's chances of survival drop exponentially. Nancy Guthrie has now been missing for 14 days. She has been without her heart medication for 2 weeks. Meanwhile, globally, crypto-enabled kidnappings are surging. Crisis 24 documented at least 231 physical incidents, including abductions, home invasions, and violent coercion targeting crypto holders or demanding crypto ransom worldwide in just 18 months. These incidents grew from 8 globally in 2022 to 20 in 2024, a 150% increase. The United States has accounted for 48 confirmed cases since 2019. Take a moment and get some free, easy money. With a Chime checking account and my link, you can get $350 when you set up direct deposit and pair that with a nation-leading high-yield savings rate. There's literally no reason not to sign up right now. Chime.com/Caleb or link in the description below. Visual, line graph showing crypto-related kidnapping incidents 2019 to 2025. Growth curve. And here's the statistic that hangs over this entire story like a shadow. The NCIC data from 2023 shows that when the missing person circumstances field is populated, a tiny fraction, 0.1%, is coded as abducted by stranger. That's how rare this is. This kind of crime is supposed to be a statistical impossibility in America. Nancy Guthrie is a statistical impossibility, and she's still missing. Former FBI hostage negotiator Chip Massey directly compared the Guthrie case to the most famous kidnapping in American history, the 1932 abduction of 20-month-old Charles Lindbergh Jr., son of famed aviator Charles Lindbergh. In that case, the child was taken from his nursery in New Jersey. A ransom note demanded $50,000. The family paid. The child was found dead weeks later. The kidnapper, Bruno Hauptmann, was eventually caught through meticulous tracking of the ransom bills and was executed. The case led Congress to pass the Federal Kidnapping Act, known as the Lindbergh Law, making interstate kidnapping a federal crime. The parallels are striking. Both cases involved the family of a national media figure. Both featured ransom demands and intense public scrutiny. Both exposed failures in coordination between local and federal law enforcement. And both forced the country to confront an uncomfortable reality, that fame and wealth are not shields against violence. The closest historical parallel by victim profile is the 2003 case of Hetty Braun, an 88-year-old grandmother abducted from her home in Wisconsin and shackled in a trailer while her grandson received a $3 million ransom demand. She was rescued after 5 days. Her abductor received 43 years in prison. A former FBI agent who investigated that case drew direct parallels to Guthrie, but noted a critical difference. A ransom kidnapper who actually has the victim would aggressively communicate with the family from the start. In the Guthrie case, that hasn't happened. What distinguishes this case from all of its predecessors is the technology. Cryptocurrency demands instead of suitcases of cash. Doorbell camera forensics, cloud data recovery from back-end systems, VoIP-enabled hoax messages. Social media as a communication channel between a family and a kidnapper. An FBI director releasing evidence on X. This case sits at the intersection of old-fashioned violent crime and the digital age's new tools for both criminals and investigators. The reaction to this case has been extraordinary, both in its scale and in its near-universal bipartisanship. President Trump responded swiftly. On February 4th, he posted on Truth Social directing all federal law enforcement to assist immediately. He personally called Savannah Guthrie to offer support. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt described the president's reaction to the surveillance footage as pure disgust, calling it heartbreaking and saying anyone involved should be held to the fullest extent of the law. In Tucson, over 500 people attended a candlelight vigil at St. Philip's in the Hills Episcopal Church. Yellow ribbons and flowers line the streets near Nancy's home. Neighbors have opened their properties for searches. People have driven from as far as Phoenix to leave tributes. The combined tip volume has exceeded 31,000 calls. On the law enforcement side, FBI Director Kash Patel has taken an unusually public role, personally releasing evidence on social media and appearing on cable news. His approach has been praised by some as aggressive transparency and criticized by others as premature grandstanding. Former FBI Senior Executive Christopher O'Leary called Patel's public comments incredibly inappropriate. The counter-argument is straightforward. Patel's release of the doorbell footage is the only reason the public has any image of the suspect at all, because local law enforcement had declared that footage unrecoverable. The media coverage has been wall-to-wall, with CNN running live update pages, Fox News providing extensive on-the-ground reporting, and the Today Show opening broadcast with updates on their colleague's missing mother. This has prompted a secondary conversation about media equity. Over 100,000 missing person cases are active at any given time in the United States. The vast majority receive a fraction of this attention. Forensic anthropologist Jesse Goliath called it a silent crisis affecting communities without media representation. That disparity is real, and it's worth acknowledging, but it doesn't diminish the horror of what happened to Nancy Guthrie or the legitimate questions this case raises about institutional competence. The Nancy Guthrie kidnapping is a single case, but single cases can be bellwethers, and this one exposes vulnerabilities that should concern every American. 27% of Americans over 60 live alone. Nancy Guthrie represents a growing demographic. Mentally sharp, independent elderly Americans who rely on daily medication, have limited mobility, and live in homes with nothing more than a doorbell camera for security. As the population ages, the number of seniors in this exact situation will increase. The question of how we protect them is not theoretical. It's urgent. A homicide unit of 6 detectives led by a sergeant with no major case experience. A crime scene released within 24 hours. Blood evidence left unsecured while reporters walked through it. A sheriff sending forensic evidence to a private lab instead of the FBI's Quantico facility. Camera footage declared unrecoverable that the FBI later recovered from back-end systems. These are not nitpicks. These are catastrophic failures in a case where every hour matters. And this raises a question that extends far beyond Tucson. How many local law enforcement agencies across America are similarly unprepared for a case of this magnitude? The honest answer is almost certainly most of them. Outside of the largest metropolitan departments, few agencies have the resources, the training, or the experience to manage a case like this competently. That's not an insult to the men and women who serve. It's a structural failure of how we fund and organize public safety in this country. The southwestern United States faces genuine criminal threats from transnational organized crime. This is not a political talking point. It's a fact documented by the FBI, the DEA, and every serious assessment of border security published in the last 2 decades. Pima County is a primary trafficking corridor. Tucson sits 60 miles from Mexico. U.S. Customs and Border Protection was involved in this investigation from the beginning. The ransom notes reference going international. Whether or not this specific case has a cross-border dimension, the environment created by border proximity, by trafficking infrastructure, by established escape routes, makes crimes like this more feasible. Communities near the border have long demanded more robust security infrastructure. This case illustrates why. In developing nations where kidnapping is common, the wealthy don't rely on the state for protection. They build higher walls, They hire private security. They live behind razor wire and armed guards. Security becomes a commodity, not a right. The Guthrie case may accelerate a similar trend in America. Expect to see increased demand for private security details in affluent communities. Expect gated neighborhoods to add armed patrols. Expect home security companies to see a surge in subscriptions. This shift from public safety provided by the state to private safety purchased by individuals is a hallmark of countries where institutions have failed. If that shift accelerates here, it will represent a profound cultural change and not one for the better. As of February 14, 2026, this is what we know. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 14 days. She has not been seen since 9:50 p.m. on January 31st, 2026. She has been without her heart medication for 2 weeks. No suspect has been publicly identified. No arrest has been made, no proof of life has been received. The FBI is analyzing unknown DNA recovered from the property. A SWAT operation on February 13th detained multiple individuals and seized a Range Rover, but produced no arrests and no sign of Nancy. Sheriff Nanos describes the investigation as a rescue mission. The FBI has processed over 13,000 tips through its National Threat Operations Center. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole has offered cautious hope, noting she's worked cases where victims were found alive after a year. But the clock is working against Nancy Guthrie. Her daily medication needs, her limited mobility, the blood evidence at the scene, all of it paints a picture that investigators have not shied away from acknowledging. Sheriff Nanos, when asked about the prospects, gave the most candid assessment anyone in authority has offered. There's no proof of death either, he said. Sometimes hope is all we've got. The Nancy Guthrie kidnapping is a case that challenges every comfortable assumption Americans hold about safety. It occurred in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, not in Sinaloa, not in Caracas. It targeted an elderly grandmother, not a cartel rival. It employed tactics borrowed from the playbook of developing world criminal enterprises. And the investigation has been marked by the kind of institutional dysfunction that, in other countries, is the reason these crimes go unsolved. The statistical reality is that kidnapping for ransom remains exceedingly rare in the United States, but rare does not mean impossible. And impossible is no longer the word that comes to mind when Americans think about their safety. And Nancy Guthrie went to dinner with her family on a Saturday night. She played cards. Her son-in-law drove her home. She walked inside, the garage door closed, and then, in the darkness, someone came for her. She hasn't been seen since.